All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's session with your host, your coach, your temporary guide, Oliver Blue. And I'm delighted to be here. So happy that you are here as we take another step up the ladder of awakened consciousness, and up the ladder of expanded awareness, up the ladder of renewing our minds, training our minds. And today we're going to be looking at workbook lesson 154 out of A Course in Miracles. And again, these commentaries are being provided by Truly Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the sharing of advanced spiritual teachings. We're dedicated to giving that which we have received for ourselves. And so it gives us great pleasure to do that. Today's lesson states that I am among the ministers of God. I am among the ministers of God. Now, remember, all of us are engaging in these workbook lessons for our own growth, for our own understanding, for our own awakening, our own enlightenment, because there's a desire in us to go deeper into the understanding of our purpose, the understanding of our identity, the understanding of our role. And so, as you listen to these messages, or as you engage in the workbook lessons on your own, which you should be, reading each lesson, not depending on just the commentary, but read the lessons for yourself. Read through the lessons for yourself, because it is God speaking to you personally and speaking to us collectively also. But the messages that are in these workbook lessons are for you. They are for you first and foremost. And so when we read through each lesson, each idea, it is a message sent directly to you. It's a personal lesson to you. And so today's idea, I am, talking about you are, and anytime we see the statement I am, it's speaking to all humanity. It's speaking to that I am which God created. It's speaking to our true self. All of us, nothing excluded. No one's excluded. Remember what we learned in the last message, that many are called, or all have been called, all have been elected, all humanity, not one omitted. All of us have received the same calling. All of us have received the same appointment. He calls it the same election. We've all been elected by God. So the authority that we operate under, the authority by which we now stand in, is the authority of God. All of us. It's not an authorization that comes from man, but an authority that comes from God only. It's called honor. God has honored us with his own self. God has bestowed his glory upon us. And so, as we read through the workbook lessons, we're reading these direct messages from the voice of God to us. Just think how much more confused and how much more suffering we would be in without the comfort of God's word, without the truth of God's word. So we look at these ideas knowing that they are true. It is in the application of them that we discover that they are true for us, not for someone else. So as you read these words, remember, these are to you. This is what God is saying to you. So he's saying that that you are, I am among the ministers of God. We are among, and that word minister basically means those, uh, which those that have been appointed, those who have accepted the appointment, those who have been elected and have accepted the election, which has been given to everyone. And one recognizes that when one wakes up to the reality of who they really are. And so it says, let us today. So it says, we are among the ministers of God, of our Creator. We are among what God created. And so we say, let us today be neither arrogant nor false humble. Remember now, we're reading this. This is a message to us personally. So today we will neither be arrogant nor falsely humble. Remember, arrogance is when we reject or deny the truth. That's arrogance, the truth of who we are. And it says that humility is when we accept the truth of who we are. So he said, let us be neither arrogant nor falsely humble. We have gone beyond such foolishness. We've seen the foolishness in being arrogant or being falsely humble. We cannot judge ourselves, especially from a place of separation. We can't do it. It wouldn't be accurate. We wouldn't have all the information. It says, nor need we do so, and there's no need to do so. So we are the judgeless ones. We have released all needs for judgments. There is only one that can judge, because there's only one that knows it all. And isn't that a great weight off our shoulder? So these are but attempts to hold. It says, we cannot judge ourselves, nor need we do so, because judgment is only attempts to hold decisions off and to delay commitment to our function. So when we're judging ourselves and others, we're only in a delay tactic. It's what he says. We're delaying the knowing and the commitment to our own function. It said, it is not our part to judge our worth. Our Creator knows above all our worth, our value. Our Creator knows above all what our nature is and what our capabilities are. Nor can we know what role is best for us. Our Creator knows why He created us, and He knows the role for which He created us. It says, what we can do within a larger plan, we cannot see in its entirety, especially from a place, from our place of limitation, of separation. With that mind, outside of the mind of Christ, outside of the mind of God, we cannot know, we cannot judge. We don't know what our role is. We don't know what's best for us. We don't know the entire picture. That's what God is saying. But there's one that does, and that one has joined with us. That one is us. And that one has the messages to speak to us, within us. So those messages, those revelations come from within and not from without. They come from God and not from man. They come from God and not from the world. They come from oneness and not from separation. Our part is cast in heaven and not in hell. The roles, the parts, the purpose for which we're here, these have been preordained in heaven. And what we think is weakness can be strength. What we think of ourselves or what we think of others as weakness, God may see them as strengths, and what we think as strengths could be weakness. Remember now, there is a point of reference, there's a point of view that we have all realized, that knows all things, that has all infinite intelligence, and that is what we are surrendering to our Father, the one will that has our best interest in heart, that only has our happiness at heart. And so that's what we have embraced. That's what we have yielded ourselves to. And it said, and what we think is weakness can be strength, and what we believe to be our strengths can often be arrogance. And you know what he's saying here. It can be arrogance when we don't know the truth. And so whatever your appointment role may be, whatever it may be, it was selected by the voice for God. That's why God is the one that performs and does the work in and through and as you. That's why the life that you have is a life of God, with God's purpose and God's plan and God's power and God's ability to perform that which what He's created. He knows what best for all of us, whose function is to speak for us as well. So God not only appoints our role, but He also speaks for us through our own voice, through our own abilities, speaks for us through our own desires, speaks for us as we open ourselves to allow this oneness that we have with God to be on full display. Seeing your strengths exactly as they are. God knows our strengths. And equally aware of where they can be best applied. God knows where we best fit. He's the one that has what? Gifted us. He's the one that is in us. He knows the unlimitedness that is within us. And that which is within us is fearless. That which is within us is not timid. That which is within us, which is God Himself, is not weak. And so, are you getting this? That's why I like that scripture in Colossians or Ephesians, or I can't remember. It says, it is God that is at work within us to will and to do of His own good pleasure. God's good pleasure is our good pleasure. Why? Because God has more interest in our happiness than we could ever know. God has never been moved by our follies. God has never been moved by our illusions. God has never been moved by our vain imaginings and our fantasies. God has never recalled the appointment. God has never withdrew His love from us. He has more confidence that which He has begun in us, He will complete. Absolutely. And so He says, whose function is to speak for us as well. So God speaks for us, through us, not separate and apart from us, but through us. And seeing, and it says, seeing your strengths exactly as they are. God knows our strengths. God's strengths, why do we know our strengths? Because they're the same as His. Because they're the same as His. And so He says, He's equally aware of where they can be best applied. And for what? God knows our best expression. God knows the best expression of yourself. He says, to whom and when. God knows that our strengths, and specifically where they are to be applied. And to whom they are to be applied and when they are to be applied. It says, He chooses and accepts. He chooses and accepts our part for us. God not only give us our roles and our part, but he chooses them for us and he performs them for us. Not separate from us, but with us. It's a joint expression. He does not work without our own consent. He waits for our consent. He waits for our agreement. He waits for our surrender. Not by coercion, but by the gentleness of the love through the knowledge of the truth. He does not work without our own consent, but he is not deceived in what we are, and listens only to his voice that is in us. He knows only his thoughts. He listens to only his voice. God is not moved over into the dream of fantasies or the hallucinations that we choose to, detour into. He know that's nothing. So he know that all of us are like the prodigal son. We eventually was coming back home because that's the only place there is. He knows that eventually that we're coming back to our first love, to our only love. He knows that eventually, like he has described salvation, is that he guarantees that all humanity will eventually come home. So how long are we going to remain prodigal? How long are we going to remain in the wilderness? How much time? Remember, God is coming from a place of eternity. God is coming from a place of formlessness and timelessness. So from God's perspective, our being asleep doesn't even phase that reality. Doesn't even change and alter the call, the role, the gifts, the abilities. It doesn't phase the voice that is within all of us. And that voice is but the memory of God, the memory of who we are. It is within all of us. He is not deceived in what we are, and listens only to his voice in us. It is through his ability to hear the one voice. Notice now, we're talking about God's ability in us. We're talking about the ability that we share with God. So that means that we have the ability to hear the one voice. It says, it is through his ability to hear the one voice, which is his own, that we become aware at last there is one voice, and it's within us. And that one voice appoints our function. That one voice relays it to us. That one voice gives us the strength to understand it, to understand the appointment. That one voice does what it entails. It actually performs the function that it has given unto us. That one voice succeeds in everything. It ensures our success in everything that we do that is related to the appointment, to the function. God guarantees our success. We cannot fail in God. It's absolutely impossible. We do fail in a false belief in a self that is separate from God. That is failure. And God really says it's nothing. It's a dream. But eventually all of us will wake up and say yes to reality. It's what the guarantee is. And that one voice appoints, it relays, it gives, it understands, it does, and it succeeds in everything that's related to it. Our success is guaranteed by God. And what is success? I'm not talking about success that the world would call success. There's only one reality, and it's called the will of God, or our purpose, God's purpose. Many are the plans, but it's only what the purposes of God that shall prevail. So the life, the experience, the reality that God has planned for you from the foundation of the world, it will come to pass. God is waiting on your consent. That's all. Just waiting on your consent patiently. And our ego minds would tell us that all these things that are happening in the world, all these things that are happening in my life that are going bad, they're wrong, that are broke. God is doing this to me because he's mad at me. That's not the case. That's your ego trying to keep you trapped and keep you in fear. God has joined with us in this, and thus we become his messenger of unity with him. So we become God's messenger as we accept the role, accept the appointment, accept the call. As we come to understand that it is God that is not only given us the role and the call, but he's given us where it is most effective. He's given us the gifts. He's given us the abilities. He's given us the when and the why and the where. It is very specific. Even though our call is universal and global, but it's very specific. There is something seeking to emerge in your life that will make you the happiest of all. That is what you're really looking for. That's what you're really seeking for. But it's not out in the world. It's already been predetermined. It's already been laid out. It just waits your consent. It's waiting on you to come back home. It is this joining through the voice for God, of Father and of Son. It is through you coming to know the reality of our oneness with our Father, that we're not separate, but we're one. One being, one life, one love that sets apart salvation from the world. It is this voice which speaks of laws the world does not obey. It is this voice that promises salvation from all sin. It is this voice that promises that all guilt will be abolished in the mind that God created sinless, which is the mind of God, the mind of Christ, which is our mind. That's what Jesus meant when he said, let this mind be in you that was also in Christ. That mind that has equality with God. That mind that sits in the same being that God is. This mind that is one with all creation. This mind that is free from all the illusions of sin, consciousness, and guilt, and fear. They say, now this mind becomes aware again of who created it. You become aware of who created you. I become aware of who created me. He says, in his lasting union with itself, we become awakened to the reality of our absolute purity and oneness with our Creator. So is itself, or our true self, the real you, the only reality in which its will and that of God are joined. And so we recognize the one being that we are, that God is and I am, I and him, he and me, we are one. There's no separation at all. There's only the one. And so now, A messenger is not the one who writes the messages he delivers. Now we become what? Ambassadors for God, ambassadors for Christ, messengers of God. But in so doing, we are not the ones that write the message, nor does we question the right of the one who does write the message, nor ask why he has chosen us who will receive the message that he brings. That's what a messenger does, even in the natural. A messenger doesn't write the message, he just delivers the message. He doesn't question the message, the one who originates the message. So, as ministers, as messengers of God, we are among them. As we embrace our true reality, as we embrace our appointment, as we what? Consent to the truth of who we are. It is not enough that the messenger accept the message. Give it to the ones for whom it is intended. It said it is enough that he accepts it and gives it to the ones for whom it's intended, and fulfill his role in its delivery. If he determines what the messages should be, or what their purpose is, or where they should be carried, he is failing to perform his proper part as bringer of the word, or as bringer of the message. So it is God whose plan that we have consented with. We no longer We no longer are operating under the plan of this world. We no longer are operating under the plan of the ego that has its basis in separation. We're no longer following the plan that we have made, but we have consented and have accepted and have embraced the plan of God for our life. And God said, okay, you are a messenger of mine. I have a message for you to deliver. I have a message for you to deliver. And I have a message for you. First of all, the message is for you first. He said, all the messages that I give are for you first. They're for you. You cannot give what you have not received. So you can't make up your own message. You can't make up God's own plan. You can't see things from your own point of view, or the point of view of the ego, or the point of view of the world, or the point of view of your history. He said you have to see things from the point of view of God, the point of view of truth, because it's from that point of view that the message comes. He said there is one major difference in the role of heaven's messengers. He calls us what? Heaven's messengers, which sets them off from those the world appoints. So the world will appoint you and give you a message to deliver, to express. That's not God's message. He said there's a difference between heaven's messengers and the messengers that the world will appoint. And as long as we're walking in our own understanding, as long as we're walking in our own false identity, as long as we are following the world, as long as we are conforming to this world and the world's messages, then we're not the messengers of God. We're not the representatives of God. We're not the ambassadors of God. In other words, we're not representing the kingdom. So he says, the messages that they deliver are intended first for them. So God gives first to himself. And when God gives first to himself, he gives first to you and me because we are part of that one self. He said the message is always for you first as we go through these workbook lessons. These workbook lessons are for you first. Uh, it's for your awakening. It's for your deliverance. It's for your salvation. It's for your understanding. It's for your healing and wholeness and completeness. So they're for you and me first. And as we allow them to heal us, as we allow them to break us free from the ego thought system, we allow God's messages to liberate us, we realize in that liberation, we realize in that healing, we realize within that understanding that God is also calling us to be a part of the plan. And we now become what? Messengers, ministers of that which we have been that which we have received. That's why Peter said at the gate to the lame man, the blind man, that which I have received, give I unto you. You cannot give that which you have not received. And you don't know that you've received that which you have not given. That's why Jesus said, this is what he meant when he says, what? Too much is given, much is required. What is required? For us to give away that which has been given. So our life is a life to be given away. God so loved that he gave. In our nature, it is the nature of our true self to give. And not to give that which the world has made, but to give that which God has created. And here it's saying in the form of messages. And the form of messages is not just limited to spoken words, but it's limited, but it is an unlimited expression of truth. Our whole life become an expression of the message of God. Oh, this is good. It says the messages that we deliver are intended first for ourselves. This is so critical. God has been at work within us from day one of us falling into the dream of separation, by going into the dream through the memory, by placing his memory, went into the dream with us. And within that memory is a voice that speaks for God. It speaks from within us. It has always spoken from within you. God has always been with you. You've never been separated from God. Why? It's impossible. He says, and it is only as we can accept them for themselves that they become able to bring them further. We have to accept the messages of God for ourselves first. Only then can we bring them to others. And to give them everywhere that they were meant to be given. Our life before the foundation of the world was predetermined, wow. It was unaltered and it's unchangeable. What we are is unalterable and unchangeable. Predestined. That's the word yes, you might want to learn. And not predestined in a way that we are robots, but predestined in a way, in a loving way, where we come to understand that God has our best interest at heart. God holds our happiness. God holds our very life. And what we're all searching for. He said, like earthly messengers. He said, like earthly messengers, those are those that are appointed by man, appointed by this world. He said, they do not write the messages that they bear, but they become their first receivers in the truest sense, receiving to prepare themselves to give. An earthly messenger fulfills his role by giving all his messages away. The messengers of God, however, perform their part by their acceptance of his messages as for themselves. So in the world would just have us without any thought, without any consideration, to just share with the rest of the world. It's foolishness. To keep the foolishness going, to keep the folly going. But he says here that the messengers of God perform their part by their acceptance of his messages as for themselves first, and show they understand the messages by giving them away. So it is in the understanding that we gain from the message of God that they're not only for us, but they're for all humanity. We give them away. They choose no role that it says they choose no roles that are not given them by God's authority. So this is a life by which God is the authority in our life, by which God authorizes us in every role that we play. We understand that. The place you find yourself in, you've been authorized by God. If you're there, wherever you are, whatever classroom you're in, whatever relationships you're in, whatever your life be right now, without no changes, they're authorized by God. And God is your authority. You operate under the authority of God. He said, and so they gain by every message that they give away. Because we understand it is for us first to receive. And then we share it, because that's what the message is intended to do. To be shared. We share the love. We share the grace. We share the peace and the joy and the happiness. We share the complete sinlessness that we are, the complete guiltlessness that we are. We share the fearlessness that we are. We share the oneness that we are. He said, would you receive the messages of God? This is a rhetorical question. Of course I would. Who wouldn't? Who don't want to know that which is absolutely complete and whole? That which is absolutely in my best interest, that which holds my complete happiness. Who would not want to receive that? He said, would you receive the messages of God? Absolutely. For thus do you become his messenger. So to receive the messages of God is also to receive your role as a messenger. They're one and the same, because you come to understand that. Like Jesus received the messages from God. He heard the voice of God and he shared it with the world. He shared it with the world. By sharing it with them that God appointed to him. And those that God appointed to him, they shared it with those that was appointed to them. So your life has an appointment. Your life has a role, has a message, and that message is to be shared with those among you. And I'm not talking about what the world would call browbeating or posturalizing. I can't even say the word properly. Postilizing, where we see in religious community where they go out and they browbeat people through fear-based theology to get them to accept God's message or to accept, God's judgment or to escape from God's judgment. And I'm not talking about that. That's not what he's talking about here either. But he's talking about being the light of the world. First, being that which you are. That is the greatest deliverance of the message, for you to be the love that you are. And so you do not know that they are yours and do not recognize them. No one can receive and understand he has received until he gives. Very important. You don't understand what you have received until you have given it away. For in the giving is his own acceptance of what he received. So the acceptance of what you have received is demonstrated through your giving. He said, you who now, the messengers of God, receive his message. You who are now the messengers of God, which is talking to all of us, receive his messages. For that is part of your appointed role. God has not failed to offer what you need, nor has it been left unaccepted. Yet another part of your appointment task is yet to be accomplished. He who has received for you the messages of God would have them be received by you as well. For thus do you identify with him and claim your own. So even though God has received the gifts that he's given to us for us, there still has to be an acceptance for ourselves, a claim for our own self. It is this joining that we undertake to recognize today. So this is what today's lesson is about, this joining of God's and his message and us as being his messenger. And that we're joined as one with God's ability, God's message, God's plan, God's guarantee of success, God's guarantee that we can't fail. It is this joining. It's this acceptance. We will not seek to keep our minds apart from him who speaks for us, for it is but our voice we hear as we attend him. He alone can speak to us and for us, joining in one voice, the getting and the giving of God's word, the giving and receiving of God's will. So God's word is his will. God's message is his will. We practice giving him what he would have, that we may recognize his gifts to us. We need our voice, or he needs our voice. So our voice is God's voice. God needs our voice that he may speak through us. God needs our hands to hold his messages and carry them to those whom he appoints. God needs our feet to bring us where he wills, that those who wait in misery may be at last delivered. And he needs our will united with his own, that we may be the true receivers of the gift that he gives. So we come to an understanding that the purpose for our bodies, the purpose for our voice, for our minds, the purpose for our sight, the purpose for everything is to fulfill the will of God, which is to fulfill our own will, because there's only the one will. See, let us but learn this lesson for today. And this is the lesson. And the lesson is we will not recognize what we receive until we give it. That's the lesson. You never recognize what you have received until you give it away. And that's totally opposite of the world. The world say what you receive, you build bigger barns and hoard it. That's why you see so much hoarding within the world. People are buying more rental space, more storage space, building bigger buildings, and just hoarding what they've received. That's so antithetical to truth. That's so antithetical to the nature of God. Hoarding, all the while their brothers and sisters are in need of what they're hoarding. And all of us have participated in that at many different levels. It's not the way. And the voice speaks to us. Give it away, and we still hoard it, hold on to it. He said, you have heard this said 100 times in 100 ways, and yet belief is still lacking. That it is not, that we will not recognize what we have unless we give it away. He said, but this is sure, until belief is given, you will receive 1,000 miracles and then receive 1,000 more, but will not know what God himself has left no gift beyond what you already have, nor has denied the tiniest of blessings to his son. What can this mean to you until you have identified with him and with his own? So our lesson for today is stated in this way. I am among the ministers of God, and I am grateful that I have the means by which to recognize that I am free. Free. Free to what? Free to be. Free to give. Free to demonstrate. Free to love. Free to be the light of the world. Free to be the messenger of God. Free to recognize that there's only one voice, there's only one will. Free to recognize of my oneness with God and all humanity. That is the lesson. That is the lesson for this workbook for today. This is our lesson for today. The world recedes as we light up our minds and realize that these holy words are true. They are the message sent to us today from our Creator. Now we demonstrate, notice now we demonstrate how they have changed our minds. See, it's for us first. Now we demonstrate how they have changed our minds about ourselves and what our function is. That's what we demonstrate today. For as we prove that we accept no will, we do not share. Our many gifts from our Creator will spring to our sight and leap into our hands, and we will recognize what we have received. So you are a minister. You are among the minister with the messages of God, and it comes through your acceptance for yourself, and then your demonstration of it to those appointed to you, to the places appointed to you, to the things appointed to you, by way of the gifts appointed to you. Your life is set. Your life is fixed. And it is in this that you find complete happiness and fulfillment and contentment. It is only through our embracing and accepting the will of God, which is the will of the Son, which is your will and our will. It's no different. Therein lies the peace of God, not by coercion. God waits patiently, has always waited patiently. He's waited many lifetimes for all humanity to wake up. Whatever it takes, the will of God will prevail. So fret not, fear not, be not dismayed. All is well in the kingdom. Nothing has been altered. Love is intact. Truth is intact. Your reality is intact. You are a minister. You are a bringer of salvation. The messages that you have received give you unto your brother. It's very simple. That is your liberality. That is where your freedom is. So in your comings and goings today, as you engage with yourself, as you engage with people, as you hear the voice for God, let your entire life be the expression of the messages of God. Let your light shine. Let your love, let your compassion be extended to everyone, no exception. Thank you so much. Workbook lesson 154. I am among the messengers of God. Thank you very much. Selah.